first.
Open fire, sir.
Maximum range.
Not for long, sir.
Waterfalls to starboard.
Fire, sir. Starboard 20.
Guns?
Sir.
I shall always steer towards last fall of shot, so be prepared to correct accordingly.
Yes, sir.
Understand, pilot?
Yes, sir. Hope the enemy doesn't, sir.
Let's jump back into part 2 of this episode with Gunny and Tim.
Tim, do you want to do a fast skim of her war diary?
Yeah, so Graf Spee sailed on the 21st of August 1939, which is obviously before the outbreak of the war, pre-planned sailing, moved to the east of Brazil. She was actually ordered to begin commerce raiding on the 20th of September 1939. Went on to sink 9 ships totaling 75,000 tons. And as we touched on before, Captain Langsdorff won a lot of respect for adhering to the Hague Convention by rescuing crews before he sunk their ships. So he sailed 21st of August from Wilhelmshaven bound for the South Atlantic. Orders were to follow the prize rules, avoid combat with warships, and to frequently change his position. 1st of September, he rendezvous with the supply ship Altmark, southwest of the Canaries, offloads superfluous equipment. 11th of September, whilst transferring stores from Altmark, his seaplane spotted HMS Cumberland, allowing her to evade the Cumberland. 26th of September, 1939, ordered to commence commerce raiding.
Can I just jump in there? That's important. So he ran into the Cumberland, he spotted her using his aircraft, and he got away. I think that's going to be quite important when we get to the battle itself, and you consider Force G aircraft. Something to bear in mind for everyone.
Yeah, 26th of September, ordered to commence raiding, and on the 30th of September, he sinks his first ship, the Clement, off Brazil. On the 5th of October, hunting groups are formed to find the Graf Spee. Force G was under the command of Harwood, with Exeter and Cumberland reinforced by Ajax and Achilles. On the 5th of October, the same day, he captured the Newton Beach. On the 8th of October, he sank the Newton Beach, having used her to house his prisoners. The day before, he'd sunk the Ashleigh. 2 days later, 10th of October, he captured the Huntsman. He put aboard a prize crew and ordered them to rendezvous with the Altmark. Altmark and Huntsman joined the Graf Spee on the 15th of October, and following a prisoner transfer, he sunk her on the 17th. 22nd of October, he sank the Trevanion. In late October, he moved position to the Indian Ocean south of Madagascar, and on the 15th of November, sank the Africa Shell. On the 16th of November, he stopped an unknown Dutch steamer, but didn't sink her. Following day, the 17th of November, he began a return passage to the Atlantic to rendezvous with Altmark. 2nd of September, he spotted the Doric Star with his float plane. She sent a distress signal leading to Harwood taking his cruisers to the mouth of the River Plate. Following day on the 3rd, he sank the Tyroa. 6th of December, prisoner transferred to Altmark. 7th of December, I'm going to struggle to pronounce this because I think it's Welsh. Sank the Strion Shalar, recovering, and in doing so, he recovered some shipping route information, which led Langsdorff to head for the River Plate area. Now, importantly, the day before the battle, on the 12th of December, his seaplane broke down and it couldn't be repaired. And the next day, 13th of December, the Battle of the River Plate.
Okay, so Harwood is he's receiving intermittent reports from these merchant vessels, some of which, despite being ordered by Graf Spee to stay off WT, are sending radar reports. Have been stopped by radar, longitude and latitude. Harwood, as a force commander, produced battle orders. And remember, this is a guy who has worked at the Admiralty as part of the team developing tactics and doctrine. And his battle orders were really in accordance with standard RN tactics. The Royal Navy used a form of battle simulation where they took into account relevant strengths of ships, weight of firepower, broadside, armour, speed, and then came up with a series of computations to say what would work and what wouldn't. And Harwood is really at the center of this. You know, as I say, this is a tactics guy, an intellectual. This is someone who has studied history and has been part of the process of coming up with a plan. His plan was Exeter was the closed, decisive range. Right. This is important. Cap's book. In 1941, HMS Hood was sunk as she rushed in to the Bismarck and the Gneisenau because Admiral Holland wanted to close the decisive range. Decisive range is the point where you're not shooting at maximum range. You want to be shooting at minimum trajectory so that you're close enough that your rounds are going to go through the side regardless of what the armour is. That's decisive range. Yeah, get in. Not knife fighting range, but really close. The Royal Navy Battle Simulator, which is called CB-311, calculated that if HMS Exeter ran in close using her 8-inch guns, 2 forward turrets, because she's nose on, she's bow on, but she also, remember what I said about flank marking? So the other 2 light cruisers are firing in concentration, and Exeter is not only shooting herself, but she's reporting the shooting of the 2 light cruisers. That would force Graf Spee to split her main armament and concentrate on one ship. So CB-311, the Admiralty Battle Order Simulator, actually recommended Exeter close rapidly, turn, and then commence a gunnery duel with Graf Spee. 1941, same with HMS Hood. HMS Hood was in the process of turning, having only been able to engage with her 2 forward turrets. Her rudder was hard over to clear arcs for X and Y turrets when she was hit and blew up. So you see the similarities there. This very much goes back to the Battle of Jutland and pre-World War One, where the Navy was fixated with the idea of closing the range and achieving a decisive victory as opposed to standing off and using superior gunnery. Was this an amends by the Royal Navy that we weren't good at distance shooting, at long-range gunnery? I think it was, and I think the Battle of the River Plate is a reflection of Jutland, our admittance that we weren't great at it, and I think this mythology of closing to decisive range lasted up until 1941 with the Hood. Now, the counter to that, I think 1940 battlecruiser Repulse, didn't she get one of the longest range hits against a German cruiser? Something like 24,000 yards or something in appalling weather.
There was Warspite as well, wasn't there, against the Italians?
Yeah, some fantastic shooting. So you can argue, you can say there's a disparity here. Did some COs go, well, actually, I trust long-range gunnery, and other COs go, well, you know, we need to close the range quickly. HMS Exeter's CO after action report, you know, he said, 0617 hours, I altered course to port and full speed orders to close the enemy and to divert the divisions in accordance with your policy signal. So Harwood wanted Exeter to run in fast, get inside range, turn, and then hit Graf Spee as fast as possible, whilst the 2 light cruisers deluged her with 6-inch rounds. I think that's a fair summary of tactics, Tim.
Yeah, obviously we both served in Exeter, and we used to do Battle of the River Plate nights. Watch the movie, and certainly that was the view of the warfare officers, that sort of like Exeter was the sacrificial lamb. Like, she had the biggest guns. Harwood wanted her to close with the enemy, try and get some hits in before she got taken out. And if the light cruisers got too close, they would get ripped apart in fairly short order. And that was kind of like Harwood's plan, and hope that Exeter could get in and do some damage, whilst keeping Ajax and Achilles at arm's length, sort of thing.
So, how did that come apart? Right. Visibility 15 miles maximum, which we'll discuss in a minute at the start of the battle narrative. Did you notice the sea state, Tim?
Yeah, not much.
Sea state,
3 to 4.
Okay. Now, if you look at the sources, listeners, that we'll put in, you'll see one that's, that describes something called cross-leveling. Now, this is a theory of mine. Sea state 3 to 4 would induce roll on Exeter. Now, it might only be 2, 3, maybe 4 degrees, but she would be rolling as she went to full speed and made a run in at Graf's Bay. If you can't what we call cross-level main gun, what happens is if you hold your two arms out in front of you and focus them on a point and then rock to the left and to the right, keep your arms stuck out still, they will come off that point that you're focusing on, right? That's called cross-leveling. What's happening is the ship is pitching and rolling, and that is meaning that your barrels, the gun barrels, are not pointing at the main point. The Mark III Admiralty Fire Control Table was not the most modern system that the Royal Navy had. And if we throw in all the human factors, adrenaline, excitement, the ship working up to full speed, coincidence rangefinders, not stereoscopic, as she turned and made the run with the sea state inducing 3 to 4 degree roll, I think that's why her gunnery was bad. Now, that's not something that anyone really mentions, but cross-leveling for gunnery is absolutely vital. It's as important as the ship pitching. Bow goes up and down, your barrels go up and down. Unless you have a mechanism in place where you can keep the barrels leveled on target, you are going to suffer accuracy issues. If you're rolling left to the right, you're going to have issues. If the DCT crew is their first action, they're going to be pumped up. There are going to be errors. That's how the military works. First contact, things inevitably go wrong. Second, third, fourth, fifth, everyone learns, everyone calms down. That's my gut feeling, Tim, as she turned in. But we better cover that when we go to the battle narrative.
Yeah.
So 0600 hours, Ajax, Commodore Harwood on board, leads Achilles and Exeter. They're following a shallow zigzag course because, even though it's 1939, there was still a U-boat threat, and the Royal Navy likes to cater for every eventuality. Mean course is 060. All ships went to dawn action stations. That was just normal. Right? When you're when you're on a warship at sea, certainly back then, just prior to the sun rising, you would go to dawn action stations.
Good excuse to get everyone out of bed in the middle of the night and make sure they're tired for the day ahead.
Sleep is for the weak. Action stations are for the brave.
Yeah.
Intention was, as usual, ships would go to action stations, and then when clear horizon, so 360 sweep, ships would fall out to what then they called second degree manning, what we would call defence watches. So half the ship's company closed up.
Bucky Bell went for a bath, didn't he? I think.
Yeah. So, visibility, right? Dawn that day, visibility was listed as maximum, which is 15 miles. Now that's 15 miles from the bridge. Yeah, Tim?
Yeah.
Okay. That's not 15 miles from the direct control tower they're using optics. So what would happen is sun would come up, the DCT with their optics would do a 360 degree sweep, as would the bridge, and nominally you would launch at least one aircraft from one of the three cruisers. 2 carried Seafox, 1 carried Auroras. So really what you want is the aircraft launch just prior to dawn to do a over the horizon sweep. Sun comes up, the DCT does a 360 sweep, bridge do a 360 sweep, and then when horizon clear, fall out from action stations, revert to state 2. Right? That's my first problem, because visibility was 15 miles, and an aircraft wasn't launched until after the battle had started. Why not?
I found something that which of the 2 cruisers launched the aircraft? Was it Ajax?
Ajax launched the aircraft at 0637.
Yeah, so she had 2 aircraft. One was configured to spot for gunnery, and the
one was
other
configured for
for recce. The aircraft that was configured for gunnery was unserviceable. So that's why I think it wasn't launched.
Yeah. For me, this speaks about a lack of organisation within Force G. Because I don't know about you, but what would be your orders? You've got 3 aircraft availability. Your hunch is that Graf Spee is going to be off Montevideo looking for single unescorted merchant vessels.
Yeah, so if I'm the flag and my spotting aircraft has gone US, I am telling either Exeter or Ajax at dawn, launch your spotting aircraft because mine's US.
Yeah, no, crashed up. Yeah. Because your hunch, the whole reason that you're at that land long is because you think Graf Spee's be there. I would want at least 2 aircraft up. They didn't do that. He didn't do that. So, straight away, that's my first question. 0610, Ajax, smoke bearing 322.
Smoke bearing red 100.
Sir, it looks like a pocket battleship.
That's the 3rd pocket battleship you've seen since Tuesday.
It is a pocket battleship, right? If you're listening to this and going, what the fuck? Watch the movie, Battle of the River Plate. So 0610, Ajax sight smoke bearing 322. Simultaneously, Exeter also sight smoke from her bearing 320. 0614, so 4 minutes later, so Commodore called to bridge, Exeter ordered to investigate.
If smoke hours, put aboard list of spares for home.
Yeah.
That list of spares again.
So Exeter turns, but 60 seconds later, signals by flag and flashing light, enemy in sight.
Flag 5, enemy in sight.
Flag 5. Yep. And immediately all 3 ships go to action stage. 1 minute later, 0616, Exeter signals, I think it is a pocket battleship. Now, visibility was 15 miles. Why didn't they see it before? Where did that smoke come from? Graf Spee had diesels. I wonder if he was doing a main engine switch.
Mainly the other.
The smoke plume.
Yeah, because that's the kind of thing. So it's 6 o'clock in the morning, isn't it? It's halfway through the morning watch. What do you do during the night? You do your engine switch overs, don't you? Like we 8 diesels, didn't she? She had 8 diesels. So we used to do that all the time overnight, didn't you? If you wouldn't have been an officer of the watch, would you? But captain's night orders on transit overnight. You're running on one time. Switch times over in the middle of the night so they can wash the engines and do that shit.
I wasn't an officer of the watch. I just concentrated on stopping officer of the watches from
hitting stuff. The other thing, and I mentioned it earlier, so Force H is steaming mean line of advance 060. So the sun's probably fine on the starboard bow.
If you're still listening, if you haven't been nerded to death, this is where you really want to pull the map up. Because this map is really instructive.
So, Force G, mean line of advance 060, so they're heading northeast. The sun is rising probably fine on the starboard bow. Graf Spee is bearing red 100 off to the northwest. So the sky off to the northwest, where the Graf Spee is still going to be dark. So for listeners, if you want to be really nerdy and geeky, maybe don't do it, or do it now because sunrise is quite late. Have a look at when the sun rises in the east in the morning. The sky to the east will be light where the sun starts to rise, but over to the west and the northwest, the sky is still dark, isn't it? So I think Graf Spee possibly obscured a little bit to the northwest because the sky is still dark. And after the engagement, there's that line in the movie, which is true. She's steaming west. She's silhouetted against the setting sun.
Yeah.
So I think you've got when the action is joined, you've got the opposite, that Exeter, Ajax and Achilles are illuminated by the rising sun. And so that's why I think Graf Spee possibly spotted them beforehand. and where he gets this idea of the 4 masts, and he thinks there's a cruiser and 4 destroyers, and that the sunlight is the rising sun is illuminating their masts. But possibly the British can't see Graf Spee yet because he's still silhouetted against the dark sky.
Because he's expecting merchant vessels, and therefore in his head he thinks the escorts for merchant vessels
Are destroyers. Because
and the top mast of a cruiser back then looked very much like the top mast of a destroyer.
Let's go back to her war diary. On the 7th, he sinks the unpronounceable, because I think it's Welsh, the Straeon Shah, and recovers shipping route info, which leads him to head to the River Plate area. So he thinks, there could be some convoys down here. And so he thinks exactly as you said there, possibly.
Might be a pair of destroyers.
Might be some destroyers there. And that will lead on to something else later when we talk about what his very confused orders were from a confused chain of command. But yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Right. You've kind of answered my first visual spotting there. I didn't take into account sun, and I didn't take into account it was a cloudless day. So I wonder, if she was changing diesels and there was a puff of smoke.
Or with diesels as well, if you suddenly power up, you're going to get that puff of smoke, aren't you?
Do you think maybe she spotted them first? And he flashed up all main engines, and that caused.
Yeah, that's when he gets spotted. From the accounts that I've read where people have done the timelines, nobody can be sure as to who spots who first. It's literally down to a couple of minutes either way. And we're not talking an age where everyone's got their watch set by GPS, are they? So the general consensus seems to be they either spot each other at the same time, or it's either way by an odd minute.
I think the window is 8 minutes. Graf Spee opens fire 0618, but that doesn't mean that she spotted them at 0618. So to get director on, to do an initial salvo, 4 minutes.
Yeah, but again, as you said at the beginning, people, with all respect to them, who may have naval history degrees, who are sat in an armchair but have never been to sea, have they considered some of the things that we've considered there?
Yeah. So, let's look at it from Graf Spee's point of view. The skipper's in his cabin. She's doing her own dawn horizon search, 360 degrees sweep. Because her rangefinder is on her foretop, which is a lot higher, she's got better look, hasn't she?
Yeah.
And she sees probably 3 plumes of smoke, 3 cruisers in line astern. What do you do? So you've probably got 20-second gap where you're looking at it going, am I seeing things? What the fuck is that? Zooming in, trying to differentiate what you're looking at, because if you're going to call the navigating officer or whatever and bring the ship to action stations, you want to be accurate. So clock's ticking, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, bridge foretop control, ships in sight, where was she been? Green 10, estimated range 12 miles. Then the officer of the watch, whoever has conduct, what does he do? Goes to the bridge wing, doesn't he? And he has a look. You don't hit the alarm buzzer. Clock's ticking, 40, 50 seconds. Has a look for his binoculars. Can't see anything because it's on the horizon. Goes to a pedestal mounted binocular sight. 1 minute, 1 minute 10, 1 minute 20, zooms in. Shit. Yep, there's 3 mastheads. Then hits the alarm buzzer. Time to go to action stations for a ship, maybe 2 minutes. Skipper takes 1 minute, 30 seconds, maybe 2 minutes to get up there. 4.5 turrets, close up. 2 minutes, maybe 3 minutes. So we're hitting that 4-5 minute limit, aren't we? Then turrets follow director. Then the turrets have to come around, load. Semi-RP, or in Graf Spee's case, high explosive. I think there's your 8 minute gap.
And we don't know what Captain Standing orders were on Graf Spee. What were the officer of the watch's instructions on sighting smoke, on sighting warships? And, how much does that add in? Is Captain Langsdorff up and awake at that time, or is Do you know what I mean? Is he in his pit still? Is he got to get up and get dressed?
Yeah, exactly. And as you say, it's one thing to be an academic. How long did it take to Graf Spee to get action stations? How long did it take to get a C-28 turret loaded with HE? What was the firing process? So, main battery manned and ready. Train out to, they would have trained out to starboard. Then you start your range taking. You don't just point the guns, do you, and start shooting?
No.
Rangefinder, you got to start your range taking. You got to start looking at deflection. That's going to take probably a couple of minutes for accurate shooting, which her shooting was accurate. Skipper gets up on gunnery control bridge. What have you got for me? So we've got 3 mastheads. Green 1-0. I believe there may be 1 heavy cruiser, 2 destroyers. Then he's going to look through his binoculars 10, 15, 20 seconds. All of these processes, all of these human factors, the ergonomics, really come into play. So, yeah, I think you're right. I think that gap between Exeter signalling 0616, I think is the pocket battleship, and Graf Spee opening fire at, 0618? I think Graf Spee was probably fast off the mark. I think he was very quick off there. To go from, let's assume state 2 action stations, to identify an Exeter, and then commencing a shoot accurately, which I think her first salvo straddled. And not bad at all. So what do we got? 0618, Graf Spee opens fire. Ajax signals general warning to all Royal Navy warships in the vicinity and Allied ships in Southern Atlantic. Immediate. 1 pocket battleship, 034 degrees south, 049 degrees west. Course 275. I'm engaging.
I am engaging pocket battleship and give our reference position.
Yeah.
Lottie, reference positions.
Graf Spee, first salvo, spread 380 meters. What do we mean by spread? So if you fire 6 barrels, as we said before, you can either have a tight group, which is all around landing in and around your main point of impact, which is great if you're on target. If you're not, I can waste time. Or you can have a spread. And what that means is you might be on target or you might not, but because your rounds are kind of spread around, you might increase your chances of a hit. Spread 380 meters is pretty good. She was short on Exeter, but good for deflection. So, again, what do we mean by deflection? Deflection is left or right. So imagine a ship and it's steaming to the left. Deflection is to the left and right of that. If you're good for deflection, it means your rounds are landing in line with the ship. If they're in front of the ship, you're short. If they're over the ship, you're over. And if they're around the ship, that's straddle. And that's really what you want to go for. Initial reports were slow, deliberate fire. Makes sense because the 11-inch C-28, 2 rounds a minute. Her fore turret engaged Exeter, aft turret engaged Ajax, and she also reported very good grouping astern. Tim, dividing fire. Where did Langsdorff go wrong?
And that's interesting because the research that I did said that Graf Spee only had 1 transmitting station, so they couldn't divide the fire of the main armament. So unless there was some local control,
I think she was firing aft. So if you remember what I said about her rangefinders, she had 37 foot foretop, 37 foot aft, and she had fore and aft turret rangefinders. So your first question would be, I suppose, why does she divide her fire? I mean, Exeter is assuming that she had a good view. Exeter is a primary threat, yet she decided to split fire. So what was the thinking behind that? Also, so her fore turret, first salvo was short on Exeter, good for deflection. Second salvo straddles Exeter. That's good shooting. However, aft engaged Ajax, who recorded a tight group, but landing somewhat astern. So that would say to me, her aft turret was firing from an aft control position, but her fore turret was firing from her main top, but using her fire control computer. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So fore turret, good, accurate fire. Aft, yeah, not so good, but still good shooting. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it's strange that he's done that because he must have recognised the closest threat was Exeter, and that's the heavy cruiser. That's the biggest threat to me, so I would want to concentrate my main armament on her. And what's the range? Does it say what range she opens fire at?
Have a look. So Exeter opened fire at 18,700 yards. So I think Graf Bay opened fire at a touch above 19,000 yards, probably 19,500. Well, inside 11-inch range.
What about 5.9s? 5.9s, 28,000 yards. Was she in range for 5.9s?
5.9s were really ineffectual, so I don't think she was shooting. So C-28, 39,900 yards. Why did she wait until inside of probably 20,000 yards? I think that's the range that she started shooting. Went straight for 2-gun salvos. Ajax and Achilles went for salvo 1 for ranging, which was short. Salvo 2 was for deflection, which was bang on. So it was in line with Graf Spade, but it was short. So that's good shooting. So they're hitting that median line, but the first 2 salvos were short. Salvo 3 was a ladder, so each barrel was slightly elevated above the other. That was calculated as being over. And then Salvo 4 was a zigzag, and then they got a straddle, which was absolutely perfect. Exeter, she just seemed to be blatting away, and there are no reports about what ranges she was shooting. But I think Graf Spey opened fire about, I don't know, 20,000 yards. I think is a good difference.
You think as well, the setup with the 5.9s being deck guns and not expecting to go into action against a warship, that they've got to bring ammunition up. Did she have ammunition ready use for her 5.9s? So is there like a few minutes got to get the ammunition up for the 5.9s, which means she's not opening fire with them straight away?
I think her 5.9s were on the 7 rangefinder on a lower control position. I don't think initially they could see anything. I've not seen any report of 5.9s shooting initially. I've seen some reports of them being very ineffectual and their shooting being consistently short. And I've seen reports of 4.1s firing airburst ammunition, which is really interesting. That's probably got some applications to today. But initially, she seems to have been firing 11-inch. And she was firing 11-inch high explosive. Well, there's another question, really. Why was she firing HE and not SAP?
Yeah, that comes up in one of the 2 books I've referenced for Anna, that she was firing HE, and it says if she'd been firing armour piercing and those same number of armour piercing rounds had hit Exeter would have been proper finished. She wouldn't have got away. But the fact that she was firing high explosive probably saved Exeter. But why she wasn't firing armour piercing, really weird. Unless she'd expended them all on sinking those 9 merchantmen.
No, I mean you wouldn't
think
at merchant vessels. So, what did you say about his initial identification of Force G?
He thinks it's 1 cruiser and some destroyers.
Were they firing HE, which would make sense against destroyers? You don't fire SAP at destroyers. You're going to be wasting your time. Standard tactic of the day was HE.
Yeah.
I wonder if
is there some confusion?
And then they in the heat of the moment, no one ordered a change of ammunition, and she just carried on firing HE.
Yeah,
that makes sense to me. Because again, we're talking about the human factor. Training is one thing. On the day of the race, when the pressure's on, shell splashes, wind roaring, shrapnel wanging around everywhere, did anyone kind of take that marching pace, think 5 seconds, and go, that track's actually a heavy cruiser, A turret switch to SAP or AP?
Yeah.
Or did they just keep shooting at her? I think that's a possibility.
Especially if they've observed some hits fairly early on, isn't it? Like, we're winning, keep going.
Yeah. Why would you? Everything's going to plan. Especially when Exeter turned away. They covered in smoke and flame. Why would you? I think just 4 minutes in, I think there was a issue on Graf Spee with what ammunition to use. But I also think the shooting was absolutely spot on. And I think Exeter encountering Sea State 3-4 roll as she made a run in, cross leveling wasn't working, and her shooting was off as a result. So Ajax and Achilles open fire at 17,600 yards. Again, what's the maximum range of a 6-inch gun? We're talking 25,000 yards. Maximum range of Exeter's 8-inch guns we're talking 30,000 yards. Why did Achilles and Ajax start shooting at such close range? Any ideas? Because I haven't. If Commodore Harwood's mission intent is Exeter makes a run-in, is flank marker for concentration firing, and the two light cruisers are supposed to deluge Graf Spee with 6-inch rounds, either common pointed ballistic capped or semi-armor piercing, you would do that from the maximum range of the gun ammunition provided. Because the further away you are, the steeper the trajectory the rounds go in, and you want to start hitting Graf Spee's deck, don't you? You don't want to be hitting her main belt. Your 6-inch rounds are going to go through 40, 50 millimeter, and yet 17,600 yards, it's not knife fighting range, but it's, it is not in accordance with his operational instructions. Now we have to jump back to, remember what I said about Jutland, 1916, what happened with a battlecruiser force when encountering shear? They consistently overestimated the range. I would put it to you, the rangefinders led Harwood to think he was further away from Graf Spee than he actually was before he started shooting. That's my opinion.
Is there also this Nelson thing, engage the enemy more closely? I see the enemy, so we charge at him.
Yeah, but if you look at the battle map, what do Ajax and Achilles do?
I haven't seen it. They turn away.
Yeah, they keep her at arm's length. And look at the point where Exeter is in extremis. But I think we need to get to that, because that's where I'm going to be a bit brutal, and I'm going to do a bit of character assassination. So, Ajax and Achilles open fire at 17,600 yards and proceed north-northeast. But this is in accordance with his fighting instructions, isn't it, Tim? The two light cruisers deluge the target with 6-inch. Exeter makes a run-in. Now, at 6:23, Exeter straddles Graf Spee, and in return, she ceases firing on her aft turret, Achilles and Ajax, and starts doing full 6-gun broadsides at Exeter. And that's when we have the first hit on Exeter in the vicinity of a catapult. And I think it killed a starboard side torpedo cruise, didn't it?
Yeah.
That's just 6:23. Now, this is an idea of how quickly things went wrong for Exeter. 1 minute later, 2 hits on Exeter. The Graf Spee's firing was phenomenal at this stage. She's shooting a heavy cruiser but bow on, so target aspect is absolutely minimum. Very difficult to spot overs, but easier for deflection. Remember, deflection being contact moving left or right. First round, hit the shelter deck abaft B turret and didn't explode, even though it was high explosive. Second hit, so probably from the same gun turret, hit B turret, knocking it out immediately. All the bridge crew on it are killed or wounded, apart from the CO +1, and a direct control tower is quite badly knocked about, and all comms to the wheelhouse, where the ships steered from, are knocked out. So Hooky Bell decides to move aft to the aft conning position, and Exeter hauls away to starboard. Ship not under control. So I think I'm right in saying that they did hoist at this stage the flag signal. Ship not under control. And that remained up until the tiller flap, which is something that we call the secondary steering position, usually directly over the rudder. They closed up and they regained control of the ship. 1 minute later, Ajax and Achilles commenced concentration firing. So they had opened fire already, but this is where the GMS, the gunnery master ship, starts taking over, and they get 4 good hits in a few minutes. But it's no good for Exeter. In 0626, Exeter, 2 hits fired on starboard anchor and in the middle of a forecastle. 6:31, having hauled off, Exeter fires 3 starboard torpedoes. Good hits noted on Graf Spee, including one on one of our anti-aircraft gun mounts. I think this is an 8-inch hit from Exeter. I'm not sure, but it looks like it's about right. The round went through Graf Spee's armoured deck, hit, through a workshop, ammunition hoist, and trashed a fresh water plant. A round landing next to Graf Spee caused splinter damage. And at this stage, Ajax and Achilles are regularly straddling Graf Spee. So, she's really under pressure here. And it was at 6:31, Spee engages with 5.9-inch guns.
Yeah, so that little delay, the 5.9s into action.
Yeah, which makes no sense because 5.9 could have been firing probably 10 minutes before. Looking at the range, what's the range of the 5.9? Maximum range 24,000 yards. So, why did she start firing secondary battery so late?
Guess we'll never know. Unless it's getting ammunition up or getting the gun crews in place.
I think there was a disconnect between a foretop director and the secondary battery was controlled by the 7-foot rangefinder lower down. I don't think the 7-foot rangefinder could see the 3 cruisers. Either that or something happened on Graf Spee's gunnery deck with Langsdorff up there was utter confusion. I mean, is that possible? That he's looking at Exeter, he's telling the gunnery officer, first of all, I want aft shooting at those 2, what he thought were destroyers. I want my 4 turret firing at what appears to be a heavy cruiser. Then realization dawns that Exeter is going to be steaming in really fast. So he says, okay, right, I want broadsides on that target. Did he simply not think about his 5.9? I mean, that would be astonishing for a career naval officer.
Yeah, and what about his subordinates? Or where's the gunnery officer or gun crew saying, what do you want me to do with the secondary armament, sir?
Yeah, I mean, what's the ideal solution there? So Langsdorff goes up, he goes to the forward control position, he has a look through, he looks through the 7-foot rangefinder, and he says to gunnery officer, captain, target, heavy cruiser, green, 20, 11-inch broadsides, secondary battery director, 5.9s, engaged 2 enemy destroyers, which would have been, actually, if you look at Graf Spee's track and you look at Achilles and Ajax, could he get the 5.9s on? Maybe he didn't shoot until he did that hard turn at 0623. If you look at the map, I wonder if it was a hard turn to port that meant he could start shooting. That would make more sense to me. So he didn't start shooting with 5.9s because he couldn't get the guns on.
If we think about the way that we do our training, maybe the way that they do things similar, all of a sudden he's confronted with 2 different sections, whereas all his training would be to fire at one target, and that all of a sudden he's presented with a confused gunnery situation, and it takes a bit of time for him to get organised.
I mean, what would you do? You've got something bow charging you down, closing the range rapidly, and you've got 2 ships that you suppose are destroyers that seem to be keeping you at arm's length. This is where I've got real problems with the official narratives and some of the experts commenting about it. If he thought they were destroyers would charge in and the cruiser would hold off, wouldn't she? But he's looking at a heavy cruiser charging in, and what he thinks the two destroyers keeping him at arm's length, but he's being showered with 6-inch rounds. I'm sorry, I don't buy that as an excuse. I think he knew from the start that he was facing 3 cruisers. I think that's bullshit. I think he knew straight away. The minute Ajax and Achilles started throwing 6-inch at him, the game was up. And I think that probably at that stage, Ajax and Achilles opened fire 0622. Yeah, I think that's when he went, you know what, they're not destroyers. They're not destroyers on my bow. They're cruisers, but there's something bigger charging me down. And that's when he went to main battery broadsides and commenced shooting against Exeter and started pummeling her. So 0631. So folks, if you look at the map, you see Graf Spee did a hard turn to port, then a hard turn to starboard. Start shooting 5.9s. These are really inaccurate, and they are inaccurate through the whole battle. There's a lot of theory why that was the case, but I think it's because they were controlled from the lower rangefinder, so the 7-foot rangefinder. Graf Spee was making a lot of smoke. Her 11-inch guns were creating a lot of cordite smoke, and it seems that she was shoving smoke floats over the side. One of the big problems with these smoke floats was the smoke was only going up about 10, 15 feet. And with the wind direction as it was blowing smoke over the lower hull and superstructure of Graf Spee, and that was obscuring her secondary battery rangefinder. But her foretop, that massive big foretop that you see in sources, was sticking above the smoke. So essentially, all you could see was the sea, lots of smoke, and then her foretop rangefinder. And that's why the cruisers, Achilles and Ajax, were getting some good hits once they come out of concentration fire. Does that make sense, Tim?
Yeah, and also the direction of the wind was clearing Graf Spee's gun smoke, wasn't it? But it meant that she couldn't hide behind any smoke that she made.
No. If you ever look at the map, so if you look at the map 0636 and you look at the wind direction, initially it was, but she started dropping smoke about 0636 and the smoke was following her course. Do you see that?
Yeah.
I think she was popping smoke floats, and with her gun smoke and her funnel smoke, that's what was obscuring her, but more importantly, that's what was obscuring her secondary battery, and that's why their shooting was so bad. It makes no sense for a main battery to be really accurate and a secondary battery to not be accurate. And then I think we have to look at a foretop and gunnery position and the skipper being there. The more you look at it, the more I think that there was a completely dysfunctional command structure in place on that gun position. I don't think there was any continuity of targeting and direction. I think he was just reactionary, and he was seeing one threat, he was seeing the other. He was seeing one threat, and he was seeing the other. And probably the gunnery officer was pulling his fucking hair out, because he'd have seen Exeter, he'd have seen that she was getting mauled, and he wanted to finish her, and then Langsdorff would just go, right, switch target left, engage this. I wouldn't be surprised if there was quite an argument going on in that position.
But that also, to me, says that Harwood's tactics of dividing her fire and splitting the range are working, because it's creating confusion in terms of her gunnery.
I think it was working, but I don't think it was because it was a good tactic. I think it was because Langsdorff was a bad skipper, to be honest.
He's not got any big ship experience, has he?
No. So, you know, what we have is, 0633. So if you look at the map, 0633, Graf Spee alters to port. So what he's trying to do there is he's watching Harwood. He's watching the two light cruisers. He's pummeling Exeter, but he doesn't want the two light cruisers to do something called crossing the T, which means that Harwood would have led the two light cruisers across his bow, limiting him to shoot at them with only his forward turret. And they would shower him with rounds. 0633, Exeter by this time is in absolute shit state. Hooky Bell is conning her from the after conning position, which was just basically a canvas-covered bridge. The compass there was knocked out. He did have to use a boat compass, as the film says. And he had a human chain of messengers down to the tiller flat. So, she's in a mess. She should have been sunk at this stage. If Graf Spee had been on top of the game, if Langsdorff had correct threat appreciation, he'd have just smacked her around with 11-inch guns, done her fully, firing semi-armor Pearson, kept the two light cruisers at bay with 5.9. And this is where I think US Navy Institute is bang on. Harwood's plan was Exeter charge in, act as flank marker, get into decisive range, two light cruisers stand off, pummel Graf Spee with 6-inch. Exeter is very quickly knocked out the battle. Within 10 minutes, 15 minutes at most, she's reduced to a shambles. She's clearly in trouble, fires on the upper deck. Harwood would have seen this from the bridge. He knew that his heavy cruiser, his big hitter, was in trouble. Did he alter his tactics? No, he didn't. He stuck to the plan. If you look at the map, all of the trouble Exeter was in, particularly at point 0646, where she is in desperate strait, turns hard to port, Y turret by this stage is in local control, so it's just firing. And I think the accounts say there was a guy on the turret roof with a set of binos, just spotting for the shot and then shouting it down into the turret. And yet Harwood, if you look at it, at minute 4-6, it's only then that he starts to turn the port and start to try and close the range to 8 miles. And I think the assessment is right that he was looking at a battle plan that was unraveling, and he was kind of, what do I do now? What do I do now? Now look, again, go back to the ergonomics. Bridge, open bridge, 10, 12 people there. You can barely move around, roar of the funnel, shell splashes, shrapnel flying around, all of these kind of things. But you've got to look at it with a realistic eye. And my issue with the conduct of the battle up until this stage is Harwood is watching a plan unravel, and he's not quite grasping that shortly he's going to be down to 2 light cruisers. Then?
Yeah, and then Ajax and Achilles close as a single unit, doesn't they? Whereas maybe I'd have given Langsdorff 3 different groups to shoot at. What would you have done?
Oh, well, I mean, the problem is, first of all, he lost Exeter as blank marker, but 0637, an aircraft is launched from Ajax. And as you touched on, Tim, the aircraft had a radio transmitter on board, WT, but it was set to the wrong frequency. So the aircraft goes up and it's on the reconnaissance frequency, not the gun spotting frequency. Nobody, once the ship had gone to action stations in the air department, when we need to switch WT over to gun spotting. Why not? No, we'll come to that later. Aircraft goes up. No one can get comms with the aircraft. So the aircraft can't spot and report. That's not great from an organizational point of view. Once the aircraft manages to establish comms, as we've said before, she starts consistently misreporting all the shot. And this means that the 2 light cruisers firing for 42 minutes becomes inaccurate. Absolutely shockingly bad. What would have been the better plan? Well, I was a Cabby AB, mate, in the Navy, as you know. You're a former warfare officer. What would you have done? I mean, my gut feeling, conservative, is to form line of battle, use speed to stay at arm's length, and just deluge her in 8-inch and 6-inch rounds. So 25,000 yards, and force her to run. At 25,000 yards, your 8-inch and 6-inch rounds are going to be plunging fire. they're going to go through a deck. I would keep one ship, probably Exeter, somewhat stern, to act as gunnery master ship. And then I'd do it that way. And then I would wait till nightfall, and then I would run the 2 light cruisers in, because Harwood is a torpedo officer by trade, and conduct a night torpedo attack. That's how I would do it, Tim.
Yeah, that's a valid plan, I would say. I think maybe there is that touch of engage the enemy more closely. And the excitement of the first sort of proper naval action of the war. You don't want to let her get away. Difficult.
I mean, looking at the map, I mean, where are we? So 0637, Ajax launches aircraft. Let's scrub around that, because that was just ineffectual. Graf Bay turned at this time, made a lot of smoke, and this threw the 2 light cruisers direct control towers utterly, and they didn't see the turn initially, because such was the accuracy of Graf Bay that they were zigzagging very hard. And again, what did we say about pre-war shoots? Accuracy is great if you're firing against a target that's doing 20 knots on a steady course, but Graf Bay is employing a lot of helm, and as you said, she's probably using main engines as well to tighten turns.
Yeah.
And gunnery subsequently went, just bottomed out completely. 0640, A turret, Exeter, and direct control tower knocked out. Exeter alters to starboard, 0640. Yeah, that makes sense by the map plot. If you look at that, to fire torpedoes. B magazine was flooded due to concerns about fire. Complete gyro compass failure. Y turret now in local control. Severe fire amidships, and in one of her mess decks. No fire main. Considerable splinter damage reported throughout the ship. Exeter is out of the fight by this stage. She's not going to be doing flank markers. She's not going to be talking to any ship by WT. 640, same time, near miss on the Achilles, direct control tower. So a main battery director is damaged. One guy is killed in there, but the film is absolutely right at this. The deflection rating, or what we call the range setter, he was killed, but he was hunched over the display. And even though all the adjustments were coming through, he wasn't resetting because he was dead. And that absolutely screwed Achilles shooting for about 5 minutes. They're still firing in concentration, Ajax and Achilles, but at 0646, WT failed, so there were no comms. Again, procedure was for one ship to signal the other to fall out from concentration firing and to commence individual firing. It didn't happen. So the 2 ships are still firing in concentration, but no one's reporting to each other. 2 minutes later, Ajax, Achilles, and Graf Bay, they're roughly heading northwest, exchanging broadsides. Exeter, she's still in the fight, turns to port. If you have a look at the map, tries to keep her aft turret open for shooting. Now is when the aircraft commences effective reporting. However, after about 2 minutes, there are problems, and the aircraft starts to misreport Ajax and Achilles firing. So what you have is the aircraft is looking at all the shell splashes and is confusing Ajax between Achilles. So really, it would have been far better if the aircraft hadn't been up at all. And the 2 cruisers had just been firing individually. Yeah. And this is stuff that should have been picked up in pre-war training. All of these difficulties, I think in the podcast we keep hammering about this, but if you don't exercise under real-time, wartime environment, this will be the end result. Exeter continues to shoot, 7-degree left, starboard, and at 0648, Hooky Bell decides enough's enough. I need to open the range. He's probably receiving a lot of damage control reports. He's hoping to get one of his forward turrets back into action, but he realizes the game is up. And fair dues. That was a good call, in my opinion. Graf Spee, she's still zigzagging. Effective range for the two light cruisers is 17,000 yards. Harwood's plan is coming apart at this stage of the game. Tim, anything?
I was just going to say hats off to Exeter and Hooky Bell, because he keeps fighting her as long as he can. He's lost the bridge. He goes down to after conning. He has to go and get a compass out of the whaler, form a chain of men down to the tiller flat. He gets her back under control. They're fighting the damage, and they're still firing the aft turret in local control. When you talk about training at FOST, that's what they'd expect you to do at FOST, isn't it? Don't stop. You've still got one turret left in local control. He hangs in there as long as he can before deciding to save his ship.
And he'll know, because he knows commander's intent, he'll know he's supposed to be flank marker. He'll know that his job was close to decisive range and pummel Graf Spee, and he can't do it. His ship's a shambles, and he's got 2 8-inch guns firing in local. So essentially he's out the battle. All he is now is harassment, really. But he also wants to stay in the fight because, this is how the military works. He wants to try and contribute to the battles, in some way. And if keeping firing gives Harwood options, he is going to do that. The bottom line here is Graf Spee's gunnery at this stage was absolutely excellent. It was superb. And with Exeter turning away with one turret in local control, Langsdorff should have finished her, shouldn't he?
Yeah, and when we come to post-action, I've got some stuff on that. People back in Germany were not amused with that.
No, I think people in the Admiralty were astonished that Hooky Bell got away without being sunk, to be honest. So by 0708 concentration fire, right, that's out the fucking window. Ajax and Achilles realised that. Real concerns about aircraft spotting, and now they commence firing independently. One of their problems is the 5.9 battery on Graf Spee. When they fired, the flashes were so bright, it did look like 6-inch hits. So that probably explains the misreporting of the number of 6-inch hits by the two light cruisers. They were mistaking Graf Spee's 5.9s firing. But this is Graf Spee's moment. 0708, in my opinion, this is where he could have turned, chased down Exeter, finished her very quickly, and then turned on the two light cruisers and forced them back. For me, this is the moment where Graf Spee could have won the battle, but he doesn't. What happens is 0617, Graf Spee turns hard to port, fired off torpedoes, her 5.9 battery and now her 4.1 anti-aircraft battery, firing airburst ammunition, are firing rapidly but ineffectively at the light cruisers. Ajax is straddled repeatedly with 11-inch, and as a result, Ajax and Achilles have to alter to starboard, clear arcs, and to throw Graf Spee's gunnery. Now, Graf Spee's seen as being on fire amidships. I think this is probably a hit on a secondary battery. One of the things that so if you remember when I was talking about 6-inch rounds and going through Graf Spee's deck armour, I don't think the ammunition was as effective as manufacturer spec should have been, because the number of hits that the two light cruisers were getting on Graf Spee, it wasn't going through the deck. There was a lot of superficial damage to the upper works, and a lot of the upper deck weapons crews were killed and injured. But I've not seen any indications that rounds were going through the upper deck, which is a little bit of a surprise. But it was freaking her out. Langsdorff did not like the number of shorts, longs, and hits that he was getting. And she had to alter away from Exeter to counter the two light cruisers. At 0617, 0716, the amount of firepower being dropped on her forced her to turn away from Exeter. So this might have saved her. 0725, good hit on Ajax. X and Y turrets disabled. So Ajax loses 4 out of 8 guns. In response, she turns, she fires torpedoes. Why at that range, right? Harwood is a torpedo officer. That he did the long torpedo course. This guy is he's cut his teeth as a torpedo attack expert. He's commanded a destroyer squadron. That range where she opened fire with torpedoes is not medium. It is not why didn't he hold on to them until a night action? It makes no sense at all. I don't understand why they did that. Also, the problem with the torpedoes was they immediately broke surface and motored around, kind of bouncing in and off the waves. Very conspicuous. And reports are that Graf Space saw them, but they were along the stern anyway. 0731 reports Graf Space torpedoes by the aircraft saw them. Achilles and Ajax altered slightly round to the south to avoid. Graf Space continues to employ smoke floats, in addition to funnel smoke, and Exeter finally goes, fuck this, we're out of it, because Y turret has gone US, and Hooky Bell decides, no, I'm not going to do anything else here. Right, 0738, the range is down to 8,000 yards. Now that, in naval terms, Tim, is knife fighting, isn't it?
Yeah, it's knife fight in a telephone box.
Yeah.
It's 4 miles.
This was when he should have been firing torpedoes, I think. So my next question is, why didn't he wait until 4 mile range and then split the light cruisers and then do port and starboard torpedo attack? Now that's fucking easy for me to say because I'm not on the bridge. I'm not under 11-inch shell fire. I've not got the roar of the funnels, the wind, etc., etc., etc. But just remember, Harwood is a career torpedo officer. And then when the range is down at its absolute minimum at minute 38, doesn't launch torpedoes because he's done them already. But he's on the cusp of a victory here. Right? At 0738, he's hitting Graf Spee repeatedly. There are lots of hits on her. She's clearly in trouble. Exeter has done her job, all right? Not as planned, but she has absorbed all the punishment. And this is the second point where things start to go wrong for the Royal Navy that day. Harwood, on the cusp of victory, is told Ajax, his flagship, has 50 rounds per gun remaining. Tim?
Use those 50 rounds and try and finish her off.
Yep. Except he was wrong.
She had about a third left, which was way more than that.
Yep. So the next question is, at what stage did the gunnery officer, who knew how many rounds had been fired, when he got that report or when he heard that report had been passed to the bridge, did he not go, whoa, fucking wrong? No. We got a lot more than 50 rounds per gun. 50 rounds per gun was correct for A turret because A turret rapid fire, she'd been in rapid salvos, but B, X and Y turret had way more rounds. But the report went to Harwood that Ajax's entire main battery was down to 50 rounds per gun. So, in response, Director Control Tower gunnery officer's report is ordered to reduce salvos, and Harwood decides to break off. Now, that is astonishing because nobody within a chain of command on that bridge, within the Ship's Action Information Organization, scratched their head and went, 50 rounds per gun. And that is not right. And it would have been very simple because all the DCT had to do was all mounts, DCT, report ammunition expended. Isn't that right, Tim?
Yeah.
Yep. A turret, 50 rounds remaining. B turret, 123 rounds HE, 60 rounds SAP remaining. X turret, 100 rounds HE, 80 rounds SAP remaining. No one fought on the Ajax to question that decision. And as a result, Harwood breaks off the action. He decides, no, I just can't do it. I've flung everything that I've got at her. He doesn't talk to Achilles and go, send ammunition state. Okay. Now, the other point is, having closed to 8,000 yards, if you remember, we talked about the 4-inch guns on the cruisers. Everyone was carrying the Mark V. Why did no one shoot with 4-inch? There was semi-armor piercing ammunition provided. There was high explosive ammunition provided. If you're on a cruiser and you're closing range to 8,000 yards and you've got 4 4-inch guns, why wouldn't you shoot? Now, allegedly on the Ajax, the skipper was sent a request by the 4-inch battery captain to commence shooting, and it never got to him. That's piss poor, right? By any stretch of the imagination, in terms of a ship's fighting organisation, a CO should be aware of all the weapon systems that he's got on board, and 4-inch should have been employed. There's no reason why it couldn't. 4-inch battery could have fired via the direct control tower, but it didn't.
I'm the 4-inch battery commander. I'm just going to open fire.
I'd just do it anyway, yeah. If I've got SAP, if I've got semi-armour piercing, fuck it, do it.
Use my initiative. I'll open fire. If the captain wants me to stop fire, he can call check.
Yeah, this, to me, is indicative of an issue of shipboard organisation. The fact that there's a secondary battery, well, even the gunnery officer, why didn't the gunnery officer in either cruiser go, do you know what, we're down to 8,000 yards, I might as well start flinging 4-inch. Fuck have I got to you? What have I got to lose it? And what do we say, Graf Spey, deck armour, 40 millimeters? Well, even if I'm firing HE from a 4-inch gun, that's going to make a mess of exposed upper deck personnel. Again, makes no sense. So, Harwood, he's told 50 rounds per gun remaining, breaks off. 0741, Ajax and Achilles retire under cover of smoke. Ajax recovers aircraft at 0905. Both cruisers follow Graf Spey astern at about 30,000 yards. 10 o'clock, this is very approximately. Cruisers close 23,000 yards. Graf Spey fires 11-inch. Achilles backs off. Keep off the grass, as said in the film. Exeter, Hooky Bell reports to Harwood, capable of 18 knots, wide turret in operation. He's clearly saying, hey, look, do you want me to close? I'm up for another round. Do so. But Harwood says, no, away you go, Port Stanley, get yourself to safety. Sometime in the afternoon, probably about 1300, all three ships, Achilles, Ajax, and Exeter, bury their dead. Very solemn occasion. I can only imagine what that was like. It would have been a bit of an impromptu burial. Coffins, Union Jacks, and the boys there in their anti-splashing overalls, covered in muck and grime. That must have been, quite a thing to see. 1915, Graf Spey fires 2 3-gun salvos at Ajax. Again, superb shooting, and this was kind of a sunset. Her first salvo, 400 yards short. Ajax backs off. 24, Harwood, this is his last chance. He starts to close Graf Spey, and what he wants to do is use the sunsetting in the west to backlight Graf Spey, and he wants to carry out a torpedo attack. But distance times speed is really against him. Graf Spey's heading towards national waters. He's going to be pushing it. And at 2200, Achilles, he gets within 10,000 yards, but Harwood calls her off. And 2330, Graf Spey anchors Montevideo. And that was it. The game was up. Damage to Graf Spey, 6-inch round from the 2 light cruisers. Main galley destroyed. Well, that's bad for a start. Because your chef can't do flour curry or flour covered roast potatoes.
It would have been curry versed on a German armoured cruiser.
Curry versed, yeah. 1 ammunition hoist is destroyed. 4.1 gun destroyed. Bakery destroyed. Oh, what? Galley and bakery destroyed. Severe damage to searchlight workshop and sick bay. Big hole in the forecastle above the waterline, probably from Exeter. 2 meters by memory. That was going to take a lot of patching. And bearing in mind that his intention was to run for Germany, that would have been a drama. Vast amount of splinter damage, lots of damage to internal comms, telegraph. Captain's cabin was destroyed and his pantry. 3 ricochets off turret. Some minor flooding, but nothing desperate. So, questions. Why were there ricochets off the main belt at 10,000 yards from the light cruisers? That would be my first question. The penetration versus armour would suggest that the light cruisers should have been going through the side of Graf Spey. why was Langsdorff on the gunnery bridge instead of in his main control position? And what effect did his presence have on the gunnery officer? I think it was bad. I think his interference, his indecision, really affected her shooting and contributed to this kind of shilly-shallying about who to shoot at, Exeter or the light cruisers. Why did Harwood stick to this battle plan, which very quickly unravelled on him? Exeter was supposed to be flank marker. She was supposed to close the decisive range. And then when she got mauled and it was clear that things were going wrong on Harwood, why did he stick to that plan? Why didn't he do what the Navy does best, which is when in doubt, close the enemy? He just seemed to be wedded to this idea. Even when Exeter was obscured by smoke and flame, she wasn't serving her purpose anymore. She wasn't assisting in concentration firing. She wasn't carrying out effective shooting, but he stuck with it anyway, until it became so blatantly apparent that he had to turn towards the enemy and then close. Why did concentration fire so badly? Unrealistic training, bad timekeeping. Why didn't two Royal Navy cruisers firing in concentration realise after they'd lost wireless communication that something was wrong and go to independent? Why were 6-inch hits so ineffective against Graf Spee? Why didn't Harwood use the speed advantage? His cruisers were doing 30 knots, 31 knots, but he didn't employ full speed until much later in the battle. Why not? Why didn't he keep her at arm's length? Why wasn't Graf Spee sighted earlier? As we've covered, why wasn't she seen at dawn when visibility was excellent? Why was it 42 minutes for the light cruisers to score a single hit on Graf Spee? And what was the thought process on the bridge of Ajax when they were looking at Graf Spee for 3/4 of an hour and not seeing any hits? I'm sorry, but alarm bells should have been ringing after 15 minutes for Harwood. Why am I not hitting her? What is going wrong here? And alarm bells should have been ringing in a DCT with the gunnery officers. What is going on? Why are we firing? And why aren't we hitting her? There just seems to have been this blind, keep firing. And as you say, Tim, this rapidity of fire over accuracy thing was a carryover from Jutland. And the Royal Navy should have known in 2039 that doesn't fucking work. There's no point shooting unless you're going to be accurate. Why was Ajax's magazine report not questioned? 50 rounds per gun? No. DCT gunnery officer should have been immediately, no, that's not right. That's not right. And yet, the report went to Commodore Force G, and he called off the action right when he was at the point where he could have started winning. Why weren't 4-inch guns used? They could have been. Local guns could have followed DCT. Would it have made a difference? No, probably not. But would have inflicted more damage. Why did Harwood use torpedoes too early? He was a torpedo officer, as we've covered. It wasn't a good range for him. He should have held on to him. Why didn't Graf Spee finish Exeter? What happened there? What in Langsdorff's mind made him look at a Royal Navy heavy cruiser burning, one turret firing, and pull away from it? What was it? The accuracy of a 6-inch fire? But he went, right, she's done. I need to go after these two now. And why was Exeter's gunnery so poor? To start with, 2 hits. I think it's a cross-leveling problem. You have to look at the diagrams. But yeah, in conclusion for me, and I know I've been talking for ages, the film is nonsense. It's a great film. Was the battle a success? Well, was Graf Spee run to ground and did she scuttle herself? Yeah. Therefore, the battle was a success. Should she have been sunk at sea? I think so. I think it was a battle that was badly fought on both sides. I think Harwood, for all his bravery, had a plan that came apart on first contact. I don't think he adapted. I think he was lucky that Langsdorff was unprofessional at the same time. I think Graf Spee was a good gunnery ship, and whatever happened on her gunnery control deck, Langsdorff thoroughly fucked it up. And I think a better skipper than Langsdorff would have sent Exeter under and really pushed Achilles and Ajax and maybe forced her away. Tim?
I think that all that considered, there was a great deal of confusion in the German chain of command as to what the pocket battleships should be doing. It took me quite a while to work out what the chain of command was in the German Navy. It's confusing, and I think it's confusing to the extent that they didn't actually know themselves. And so there's a lot of contradictory orders floating around to the captains of the Panzerschiffs, and trying to unravel it all is quite difficult.
Yeah, I mean, it's been the hardest podcast that I've done because you have to look at the individual actions. But I think the bottom line is that if you were CEO of Graf Spee, what do you do in terms of threat?
I'm trying to find it in my notes here because it's so contradictory in what Langsdorff had been told to do.
But you were positively engaged. If you're CEO and you're positively engaged by three ships, what would be your inclination?
To fight back.
To kill the biggest threat first. If one is, and I don't know, he was on the point of doing it. Her shooting was excellent, even though she was firing higher explosives when she should have been firing semi-armor piercing. He was on the point of killing Exeter, wasn't he?
Yeah. So the operational directives for captains concluded in line with Hitler's thoughts that he expected his officers to be aggressive, and Hitler's quote was rather death with honour than strike the flag. And there was a signal that went out to the Deutschland of the Graf Spee on the 4th of September, which contradicted that, and this was sent by radar, and it said that enemy naval forces, even if inferior, were only to be engaged if it would further the war on merchant shipping. And I thought that, does Langsdorff act in accordance with that? Because he thinks they're destroyers, and he thinks, I take out the escort, there's a convoy nearby, and then I can get after the convoy. And then he realises he's got a heavy cruiser and 2 light cruisers, and then his plan's gone to tatters.
Yeah, but then what would you do? You see a heavy cruiser and maybe 2 destroyers. What would you do? I'd kill the heavy cruiser first.
Yeah.
The 2 destroyers I can deal with, after. That heavy cruiser is, and he did it. He did it. He nearly killed her. I mean, I don't know. Was he that much of a humanitarian, but he didn't like the idea of killing a ship that was already out the fight? Is that a stretch?
Hard call, but he may have also taken the view that I've damaged her enough that she's out of the fight. She's not a threat to me anymore. I'm going to go after the 2 that are still a threat. Possibly.
I don't know. I don't think that's anything that anyone will ever be able to answer. We can agree he was a humanitarian and probably utterly unsuited as a naval captain.
He'd also had some duff intelligence. In the month before, Raider had sent out Gneisenau and Scharnhorst on a mission that achieved nothing, but led him wrongly to believe that the British had stopped the hunt for Graf Spee. So again, that possibly fits in with why does Langsdorff think he's come up against 1 cruiser and destroyers, because Raiders told him all the capital ships are not looking for him anymore, and that the British had given up the hunt for him.
Yeah, I don't know. It's been a fascinating look into, because I don't know about you, but my knowledge was kind of built around the movie. And having a deep dive into definitely the gunnery side of it, depressingly, but not unexpectedly, I've unearthed long problems with the Navy that were a carryover from 1916 that we failed to address. And I think the gunnery on the day, I think Exeter's gunnery was poor because of the sea state, 3-4, cross-levelling. I don't think her fire control system was capable. It was a damning condemnation of concentration firing for the Royal Navy, even when it was working 4 hits. Not superb. I think the hit rate was something like 3.7%. And it was only when they got in close inside of 10,000 yards that they really started hurting her. Was this the situation across the fleet? Probably not, because we've mentioned the 26,000 yards. I think it was it was above that, maybe 30,000 yards hit. But if you look at HMS Hood, 1941, closed to decisive range. Harwood's orders to Exeter were closed to decisive range. 1941, HMS Hood, Vice Admiral Holland, closed to decisive range. And my gut feeling is that is a realization within a Royal Navy that we weren't able to do long range shooting accurately. And tragically 2 years later, we saw, another example of that inherent aggressive need to close the range, which is great as long as the enemy isn't a great shooter and is really accurate, because if they are, you're going to find yourself in trouble really quickly. Any other points, Tim?
Yeah, so sort of the chain of command I worked out was that Admiral Raider was Commander-in-Chief, and he was also the head of the, my German again, Seekriegsleitung, which was German Naval Command. Then underneath him, you had the Fleet Commander, that was Admiral Boehm, but he got replaced in October 39 over a disagreement about whether Scharnhorst and Eisenhower should have supported mine-laying operations. So you've got the Fleet Commander being changed during Crafts Bay's sortie. And then you had Group West and Group East, which were the German naval commands. And I'm pretty sure, if I read it right, that Spey was under the command of Group West, and ships were supposed to follow the orders of the group that they were under. But then you've got the Fleet Commander's instructions, who's further up the chain of command than Group West, and then you've got the overriding instructions to operational commanders in command of ships, and it's all very confusing. And right at the top, Hitler and Raider disagreed from the offset about how the capital ship should be used in the Commerce War. When Grasp gets to Montevideo, Langsdorff consults Raider on the issue of internment in Montevideo, and Raider and Hitler consult and agree that she should attempt to break out. At that point, Hitler's angry with Langsdorff's decision that he didn't finish off the Exeter, and he viewed his destroyer and U-boat captains, young commanding officers, as daring. And amongst his more senior officers, Hitler saw in his own eyes, a lack of fighting spirit. And he was dissatisfied that Exeter had not been finished off. Publicly, Raider supported Langsdorff, but privately he criticised him, and he said that ships should fight it out until the end, regardless of consequence, were Hitler's words. And Hitler believed his senior officers were moved too much by strategic decisions and not to the immediate job of fighting.
And of course, Graf Spee was named after a guy who in 1914 fought to the death at the Falklands against overwhelming odds. So, you kind of never been a fan of Hitler, obviously. But, what were there grounds for suspecting that Langsdorff lacked fighting spirit and should have made a run for it? I mean, the argument goes that the 2 meter gash in her bow rendered her unseaworthy. You can plate that. You've got ships, you can weld over that. Could she have made a run for it?
Well, there we get onto something interesting that in one of the books I've referenced, it wasn't until about the year 2000, and again this is indicative, I think, of the confusion of chain of command, that a signal was sent by Langsdorff's adjutant to the SKL saying that Graf Spee only had 16 hours of fuel available. And going back to the diesel engines, one thing you have to do with diesel engines, because I think it's because they've got fuel injectors, is you have to filter the diesel fuel. You can't just run it directly from your tanks. into the engine, so it had a whatever you want to call it, a purification or distillation system. But apparently that was damaged and knocked out and unrepairable during the action. So the only fuel that she had left was the fuel that was in the ready-use tanks, and that was 16 hours worth. So she wasn't going anywhere. She wasn't getting back to Germany, and she wasn't getting anywhere full stop. And so then there was... apparently this didn't...
The distillation plant was destroyed.
But apparently this... It's in one of the books I've referenced for Anna. This didn't come to light until about the year 2000, that this signal was unearthed in the archives. So potentially she wasn't going anywhere anyway.
Well, that would make perfect sense then, yeah.
But so if that signal was sent to the SKL, that obviously never found its way to Rader and Hitler because they told him to fight his way out. And he obviously, we know what the outcome was. He disobeyed that order and he scuttled the ship. Of course, the final ending was that the crew of the Graf Spee, who spent the rest of the war in Buenos Aires, did I get that right? They were returned to Germany on board, named the ship HMS Ajax. At the end of the war, when everyone was returned home, crew of the Graf Spee repatriated from Buenos Aires to Germany on board HMS Ajax.
This episode is dedicated to the memory of Lieutenant Rodri Leischen, RN, who died at Derriford Hospital on September the 5th, 2024, of injuries sustained after the Merlin helicopter he was piloting ditched in the English Channel. A consummate professional and superb airman, he is greatly missed by the Fleet Air Arm community.